Record. Okay. Hi, my name is Amanda Will. Today is March 8th, 2023. Um, I'm here with Ann Anderson, interviewing her for a teacher who has been around students with traumatic brain injury, chronically ill, hospitalization, and or degenerative conditions. She will go into talking about the age of the students and the specific conditions that they had. So the first question is, how can teachers form partnerships with families and help address some of their needs?
Um, I guess it sounds silly, just talking to them, asking them how they handle certain situations at home. Um, Usually gets them started talking about their children. I used to send a journal home every day and let them know something good that went on, ask them to let me know if something good happened with their children that night or if something that would upset their children the next day went on. It just showed how much I cared about each child.
What was their reactions to that, to the journal?
Um, Most parents liked it. I tried to get them to initial it so I knew they read it every night. Never could get them to do that. But if I forgot to send the journal home one day, they were all over my case the next day. Where's my journal? What happened? So apparently they were reading it.
Oh, wow.
Um, and Yeah, they seem to like it. Nowadays, you would send a video or a photograph, but that was back in the Stone Age when we didn't do, I wrote everything out. So the last hour of the day in my class, my aides did something, a game or read stories with the kids or something so that I could do the journals.
Okay. Okay. Next question is, what are some barriers to forming partnerships with families?
Um, if you tell them that their child is doing something and that upsets them. I had a child who was spitting and he was spitting in our faces all day long. Um, so we started teaching him to keep a Kleenex in his pocket. And every time he wanted to spit, we tried to get the Kleenex up to his face fast enough. This was long before COVID, but still, every time it happened to an aide, I told him to go wash their face. So being a good teacher, I told the father that, your child is spitting in our faces every day. And he was furious with me that I should say something negative about his child. And he denied it. Um, the child finally, was too old for my classroom and went to another room. I saw the child a couple of years later in another school. And I said to the teacher, why is he in this school? Why is he not where he was before? Oh, he had this behavior of spitting all the time. And what what the administration decided to do was move him to a different school as, I guess, as kind of a punishment. So he was spitting all the time. And
Yeah.
maybe I was the first teacher to address it with the father, and he couldn't handle it. But when other people have said that he's has this behavior,
Oh,
he
wow.
had to accept it. So he
How,
grew out of it eventually. By when he got to the other school, he apparently grew out of it.
okay. How old was this child? She did.
Um, I had him for first, second, and third.
Okay.
And when he went to fourth, might have been around the time I retired. So I didn't know what happened. He was still in the same school that I was in. I didn't know what happened, but later on I saw him in a
Okay.
school 5 blocks away.
And then is he one of those students that had was chronically ill, hospitalized, degenerative condition, or brain traumatic injury?
No, I think he was autistic.
Autistic. Okay. Right. Is there any other barriers uh, for farm that would prevent partnership for between parents and families? Yeah, sorry. What are other barriers to forming partnership with families with like schools or teachers?
I just think sometimes, parents get mad at us. They don't want to hear what we have to say, especially when you're working with first, second graders. They've only had these children for 5 years. They're not used to the diagnosis yet. So, a lot of parents would ask me, well, when are they going to grow out of this? Well, with autism, they're not. They may mature over the years a little bit, but they're always going to be autistic and they don't want to hear that. Other parents who are responsible for the condition of their child. I had a child who was, he was a crack baby and he was born in jail. The mother had all the gang symbols and tattoos, and the father had all these gang tattoos and everything. And, this child was born, one eye was here and one eye was way down here. It was really obvious that his eyes weren't the same. He had a cleft palate, and the palate grew right here where his front teeth were. So he had this big glob of pink right there. He was 9 years old before the front teeth grew down far enough to go through that glob. And he had 3 fingers and 7 nubs. He didn't have enough brain power to ever learn to talk, I don't think. Um, it took us 2 years to teach him to nod yes and know what it meant. And we used toys all the time. We would we turned the toy shelf around so he couldn't get at it. And we'd hold up every single toy. Do you want this toy? Do you want this toy? If he said no to everything, we'd have to go back through and say, do you want this toy? And it took 2 years, but he finally got the idea of yes, you know, and we also taught him to feed himself with a specialized spoon that he didn't have to grasp, something that went on his hand like this. If he could, I guess it went on his hand like this, and he could put the spoon in his mouth. And we taught him how to open the refrigerator. So one time, apparently, he was hungry. His mother would leave food and drink around the house. So if he was thirsty, he just had to find the table that had a water on it or orange juice on it. And he never had to ask for anything. And so I guess he was hungry one time and couldn't find any food. So he went to the refrigerator, he opened it, took out the first thing he saw, which we lucked out. It was cottage cheese. It could have been butter or, anything, but he took it. I guess he put it on the floor, opened it, opened a drawer, got a spoon, and his mother walked in. He was sitting on the floor eating. She cried for a week because she was feeding him. He was 9 years old and she was still feeding him. It was like her penance for doing drugs while she was pregnant. And she'd come in and say, I didn't know he could do that. I said, we've been telling you that he can do these things, and I don't think she was happy with us that we had taught him that, because she wanted to do her penance for the rest of her life,
Mm,
but he had to be, he could learn. He never spoke, but he could learn things, and that's what we were there for. So
oh
you
wow.
know he didn't
Was
need
there
to learn addition and subtraction, but he needed to learn how to feed himself, and
yeah,
things like
was
that.
there any barriers between the mother and you, or you and the staff and the mother? Like, did she interrupt any of the learning? Like you said, because she had a penance.
um i I think at first she was just annoyed with us that we could teach him where she couldn't, because she never tried.
Mm,
But I think somebody must have worked with her and she got over it. I did
okay.
have a parent who sabotaged everything I taught her child. He had cancer when he was 4. So by the time I got him at 6, he was cancer free, but cancer kills, cancer cells. It also kills regular, healthy cells. So I could never teach him to read. But she also only had a 3rd grade education, and she didn't want him smarter than she was. So she sabotaged everything I did. I saw him, he must have been about 25. He had a magazine in front of him, whether he was reading it or just looking at the pictures. I don't
Hmm.
know. But I used to tell him, I won't let you go to the 4th grade unless you learn to read. And I wasn't going to do that. That was a stupid, empty threat on my part. And, he went to the 4th grade. And at 18, I saw him and he couldn't read then. So I don't know if he learned
Oh wow.
or what. But
That's a really big barrier.
yeah, and she just didn't want him to progress.
Yeah. Jealousy?
Yeah. Was it jealousy? Maybe it was just, he's my baby and I don't want him to grow up. She spent so much time
Hmm.
at 4 and 5, helping him over the cancer. And the younger brother was messed up because he never got any of mother's love and mother's caring over those years.
Hmm. Oh wow.
So, he had problems too later on. Not that he couldn't learn. He was smart, but he always had, in high school, he had behavior problems.
Okay. Yeah.
So it doesn't just affect that particular child, it can affect the whole family.
The whole household. Absolutely. Okay. All right, for the next question, what are challenges and rewards to working with students with severe disabilities?
Oh, those little teeny steps. If Eddie learned to nod yes, and other teachers who are in gen ed kind of went, but this was a huge step for this kid. Um, if somebody learns to add, you know, it just, people in our profession, we see these little steps where other teachers see steps this big, we see steps this big. So anything they do is huge for us. And that's what I tried in my journals to say to parents. You know, I had a student who always took her shoes off. And she could be sitting there like this with her hands on the desk and she could get high top shoes off. Don't know how she did it. And, I'd write, oh, she didn't take her shoes off today. That's wonderful. But this was a child from India. And when they come in the house, they take their shoes off. So she was comfortable in the classroom. She took her shoes off. And she was also a child who ran. She would leave the classroom and run. And she was autistic, very autistic. And I solved that by asking the parent, I guess the father was a runner, and I asked him if he could take her running with him. And apparently, what they did was they hired a teenager on the track team at the high school, and they'd take her to the track, and this teenager would run around the track with her. And she stopped running out of the classroom.
Oh,
So
wow.
she couldn't talk and tell us what was wrong, but she knew she just needed to run. She had that much energy,
Yeah.
you
And then
know.
she stopped
So,
running.
you know,
What about
we, but you have
challenges?
to be careful.
Hmm.
Challenges between with parents, is that what you mean?
It's more in general, just what are challenges with working with severe disabilities? I think it could be a general question of either the student
Oh,
or maybe
uh,
family.
well, where weren't there challenges? I spent a year in high school with ED students, and I was the shortest person in the classroom. So when the boys started fighting, they were all over 6 feet tall. I'm down here at 5 feet. They're 12 inches taller than me. I couldn't get their attention. So I'd have to stand on a chair. And then I was too high for them. And then I'd have to bend down and get in their faces to get them to stop fighting or find out why they were fighting. Or that was a very challenging year. I did a
Oh,
lot
wow.
of good teaching with them, but
Mhm.
the behaviors were really, really hard.
Or challenging. Okay. And like just boys or were there girls too?
There were a couple of girls. One one of the girls, when she was living with her mother as a very young child, her mother would party all night and not feed her. So when she'd get up in the morning, she was thirsty, she'd drink whatever was in the glasses that were left on the table or on the floor, whatever. She became an alcoholic by 7 or 8. That's all there was to drink. So, and she was too little to go and turn a faucet on and get water and everything. So she had a lot of difficult behaviors by the time she was in high school.
Was she drinking alcohol in high school?
No, I think she was dry and trying to get sober. Um, I know she was supposed to leave class in the middle of the year because she turned 18 in February or March or something. And I had to write a letter to whoever it was. She was living with her grandmother by then, and her mother was out of the picture. Um, to her social worker or something to get them to allow her to stay in school to graduate in June because they wanted to, even though she hadn't finished the 12th grade, they wanted to just drop her because she was 18. And, um, apparently whatever I said worked, and we kept her until the end of
School year?
the school year. The grandmother was very, very grateful that I had taken the time to write this letter and help the kids stay in school.
Yeah, that's amazing. Next question is, how do you prioritize students' academics when they learn differently than general ed students?
I never particularly worried about where they were supposed to be if they were gen eds, just what I had written in their IEPs. If they were, 7 years old and couldn't add yet or didn't know their alphabet yet, that's what I worked with. And I never tried to we tried to get them with gen ed students to play. One time I taught my class to play Foursquare so that they had something to do at recess time and they could maybe get in the game with gen ed students, but they got so mad every time they got out that I had to teach them good sportsmanship along with teaching them how to play Foursquare so that
Mm,
they wouldn't get mad. It took 6 months. In the wintertime, we used to play in the
mm,
classroom. I'd move the desks around so we could continue to play Foursquare, you know, and it after a while, because when I would get out, I'd get out on purpose or something. I'd play with them and
mm.
I go, oh well, no big deal. And it took about 6 months, and then I slowly started seeing them doing that too. It's okay. I got out. I'll stand here and I'll get back in a couple of minutes. So it
Yeah.
was, you know,
Okay. Um, so I lost my place. The next one is, what helpful tips would you give to incoming special ed teachers entering the field in the 21st century? Since, technology's really taken over.
oh yeah. You guys know a lot more about technology than I do. It's like patience. That's the first thing that we need is to be patient. And these kids, I guess all kids, but our kids especially are a puzzle. And it's our job to figure out which puzzle piece will fit today. And it it may not fit tomorrow, but for today, I had a child who had cerebral palsy. And I figured out if she came in and wrote with her right hand, picked up a pencil just with her right hand, she was having a very good day. If she picked up the pencil with her left hand, she didn't know anything. She couldn't write her name. She couldn't spell anything that she had learned yesterday. She couldn't do. And it took a while to figure that out and be okay with it. I always told her mother it was like it was a blanket over her brain some days, and she couldn't get through the blanket to access the knowledge that she had if she picked up the pencil with her left hand. She picked up the pencil with her right hand, the blanket wasn't there and she could remember things. And I always wondered if she didn't sleep, and her mother would say, well, of course she slept, but did she go into REM sleep?
Mm,
And that was before we had phones that check how long you were in REM sleep and things like that. I would want the mother to get one of those watches and put it on her, especially at night, and you know see if that made a difference.
yeah.
Is there a way we could get this child into deeper sleep? That's when I started thinking that, you know, if I had known this when I was younger, I would have been a researcher for autism instead of a teacher of
Mm,
children with autism or other health impairments. Because I kept wondering, how can we figure this out? And
mhm.
at that point, I don't know that there was a way. I didn't know a way. And her mother one time told me that I was the only person her mother had figured that out too, about the left and the right hand. And she said I was the only teacher that ever figured it out. Well, I spent a lot of time at school, at home, driving, thinking about these kids. What did they do? What did I say? How should I have said it? How can I have more patience? We always need more patience.
Did you figure out the left and right hand just over a period of a year or shorter? Like,
I think it might have been a year, it might have been longer because I would keep my children for 3 years.
okay.
I kept them for second and third. So nothing happens in a couple of months. It takes, and it took me a long time to figure this out. Sometimes a teacher just needs to sit and watch these children
Mhm.
and just think about them. And sometimes that's better than teaching them to add or subtract or the letters of the alphabet. Just figuring out who they are and what they are inside. I always wished I could get into their brains and just see what was going on in there, and
Mhm. I thought you did a really good job though. I mean, if she's saying you're the only teacher to figure that out, that's pretty impressive.
well, and I don't know how many teachers, did that, just sat there and watched because, I would be very embarrassed if the principal walked in and all I was doing was sitting there and watching.
Mm,
I had one principal who understood and would have been fine with it, and the others I would have been called on the carpet. And why aren't you teaching? Why aren't you, you
yeah.
know? And sometimes these kids have had enough for the day. The day was too long for some of them, but the school wouldn't let us send them home. It wasn't a good idea to send them home at lunchtime and let them think this was how long their day was. So I did a lot of my teaching. I'd call it a game.
Mm,
If we played bingo with sight words, and they had to make their own bingo cards. And I'd say it was a game. And, but they were learning sight words.
so
And the
without
parents
realizing it.
sometimes yeah, they didn't know the difference, but they go home, what did you do today? And the kid would say, we played a game. We played games all day. And the parents would come to school. What do you mean you're playing games all day? Yes, I played bingo with sight words, and and we played this game with numbers, and we played this game with, alphabet letters, and, you know, things like that.
Yeah. All right, this is our last question. It was supposed to be the first one, but I missed it on accident. What are the needs of peers and family members of students who have traumatic brain injury or chronic illness, hospitalizations? Like, what are their needs? Like the families and peers of them.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is we need to listen to them. Um, they're suffering too. If their child has, even if their child is born with a disability, or there was an accident, you know, they're feeling guilty. A lot of mothers feel guilty. They used to call mothers of autistic children refrigerator mothers, that they weren't loving enough, and that's why their child was autistic. And some people take all that junk to heart. Oh,
Mhm.
I must have done something wrong. I must have, did I eat something I shouldn't have? You know, and they're guilty. And the best thing we can do is listen to them and try to say, this isn't your fault.
Like, so
You
like give
know,
supportive feedback to them or just
I
give
just
positive.
yeah, I didn't want to be their therapist, but sometimes we just have to listen. And I had I lucked out with aides, that they were very good at their jobs, and we worked very well together, all of us. So if a parent needed to talk, I could stand outside the classroom. I kept the door open so I could see what was going on. But the aides could go in and start the lesson for the day. They knew how to read my lesson plan. They maybe the day before we had talked about it, or that morning. So they knew what to do, or they knew to, play a game with the kids or read the kids a story while I talked to a parent who was upset or just needed to talk, or their kid did X, that morning that upset them, and whatever, it's not necessarily in our job description, but we need to help parents that way, and that gets us an in with the family. And um they, on my birthday, the parents used to get together and have these big lunches for me, and things like that. And
Wow. So, I mean,
it was
it's,
nice.
yeah.
They probably couldn't do it now, but that was, years ago. These kids that I'm talking about are all grown up. I mean, they must all be in their 20s at
Hmm.
least. I had one year that a couple of years that I had 13 to 19-year-olds, and there were 9 kids in the class, 9 in diapers and 8 in wheelchairs. And the hardest thing there was if they had a fire drill or an earthquake drill, I didn't have enough support, aid support, to take every wheelchair out. And what they wanted us to do is throw a blanket over the kid and leave him there. And, it's triage. You help the ones that can be helped first.
Hmm.
So if a kid was on the toilet, we couldn't get them cleaned up and their pants up and get them out. We had to leave them there. And that was very hard. And what they said was, if you're outside when this disaster, if it was an earthquake and the school was falling down or something, you could help. But if you're inside and you die, you're not helping anybody. So they wanted us to get out with just as many wheelchairs as we could take out
Hmm.
and just leave the rest. That was very, very difficult. I couldn't
Yeah.
stand that school. It was a dinosaur school. Every kid was disabled. There were no gen ed kids in that whole thing. And I don't even think that school would exist today.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't agree with that whatsoever, to just leave a child behind.
But, they didn't want us to go back in and get them.
Hmm. I mean, shouldn't they have more support then if that's their reasoning?
Yeah, but if you had every class had 9, 10, 12 children in wheelchairs,
Hmm.
and you all had, 2 aides, and I had a couple of grandparents. Um, they were all little Filipino grandparents who needed something to do for the day, and they volunteered in the classroom. I mean, even there's only 5 people. You can only get 5 wheelchairs out. The one child who walked could be encouraged to hold onto a wheelchair and walk with us. We could get her out, but that still maybe left 2 children in there.
Wow.
It was very hard. I hated
Yeah.
that school.
Uh, well, thank you. That was all my questions. Thank you for answering them. It's nice to like just hear some experience, and um it's a lot to take in. You've been through a lot and experienced a lot.
Yes, well, I was in special needs for, 25 years. You get a lot of different experiences, and there's a lot of children, I don't always remember their names, but I remember what happened to them,
Mhm.
or, you know, what we did with them, and how, the boy who never talked and learned to nod, he was the sweetest person inside. He was just never would hurt anybody, you know,
Mhm.
but he couldn't talk. So he hit sometimes only because he needed something. He needed your attention, or and he had no other way of,
Communicating.
yeah. And we didn't have AAC devices
Mm,
back then. We had buttons, but it would only say one thing, and each kid had to have their own set of buttons. It just didn't work well, but that was back in the Stone Age. So anyway,
yeah.
I like talking about them.
Yeah,
They
no,
were
I
all
love talking about it.
they were all sweethearts. Anyway, we're gonna lose this connection in a minute.
Yep, I see it right there.
So,
I'm gonna stay on and do my reflection. Thank you so much. And I turn it, I'm gonna pause this.